Diabetes remains a major public health concern in the Philippines. And in fact, an estimated 3 to 4 million Filipinos have diabetes. As we celebrate World Diabetes Day tomorrow, we take a look at the causes, symptoms, and treatments available for patients.
Naging pangkaraniwan na sa mga edad 12 hanggang 18 ang may hypertension o high blood. Batayan sa survey na isinagawa ng Philippine Heart Association o PHA.
Globalization and rapid urbanization. These two have a huge impact on the lifestyle of the entire population. This reality has led to an healthier lifestyle and changing environments, which cause a rapid increase in the incidence of non-communicable diseases or NCDs, particularly among low and middle-income countries. Moreover, several studies demonstrate that low and middle-income countries are going through an epidemiological transition, as well as double burden of disease, where NCD cases and communicable diseases continue to increase simultaneously. People of all age groups, regions, and countries are affected by NCDs. These conditions are often associated with older age groups, but evidence shows that more than 15 million of all deaths attributed to NCDs occur between the ages of 30 and 69 years. In the Western Pacific region, home to over 26% of the world's population, NCDs represent 92% of the burden of disease in disability-adjusted life years or DALYs in high-income countries and approximately 63% among low and middle-income countries. Low and middle-income countries in the region have more than a quarter of the global total burden of disease in DALYs for malignant neoplasms, and close to a third of the global total in respiratory disorders. They also have a fifth of the global total burden of disease in DALYs for diabetes and CVDs. Poverty is closely linked to NCDs. The rapid rise in NCDs is predicted to impede poverty reduction initiatives in low-income countries, particularly by increasing household costs associated with healthcare. Vulnerable and socially disadvantaged people get sicker and die sooner than people of higher social positions, especially because they are at greater risk of being exposed to harmful products such as tobacco or unhealthier dietary practices and have limited access to health services. In low-resource settings, healthcare costs for NCDs quickly drain household resources. The exorbitant cost for NCDs, including treatment, which is often lengthy and expensive, combined with loss of income, force millions of people into poverty annually and stifle development. Common risk factors underlie NCDs. An estimated 80% of premature heart disease, stroke, and type 2 diabetes, and 40% of cancer could be avoided through a healthy diet, regular physical activity, and avoidance of tobacco use. Globalization and urbanization serve as conduits for promotion of unhealthy lifestyles. These common risk factors give rise to intermediate risk factors such as raised blood pressure, raised blood glucose, unhealthy lipid profiles, obesity, and impaired lung function. In turn, the intermediate risk factors predispose individuals to the fatal four: cardiovascular diseases, cancer, chronic respiratory diseases, and diabetes. In the Philippines, hypertension and diseases of the heart remain in the 10 leading causes of morbidity. In 2010, hypertension ranked 4th, while diseases of the heart ranked 10th. Death from diseases of the heart was still the principal cause of mortality, with a rate of 121.1 deaths per 100,000 population. In addition, deaths due to vascular diseases ranked 2nd, and diabetes ranked 6th.
Almost all of us know someone who has suffered or died from heart disease, cancer, lung disease, or diabetes. Non-communicable diseases kill more people than any other cause of death worldwide. This includes 15 million people who die each year in their most productive years, between the ages of 30 and 70. The vast majority of these premature deaths do not occur in rich nations, but among the poorest people in the poorest countries.
But what can we do? The WHO package of essential non-communicable disease interventions or PEN disease interventions is a prioritized set of cost-effective interventions that can be delivered to an acceptable quality of care even in resource-poor settings. The WHO PEN disease interventions is the minimum standard needed in integrating and advancing care of NCDs in primary healthcare as well as ensuring equity in providing healthcare and achieving universal coverage of health reforms. In a low-resource setting, selection of cost-effective interventions is particularly difficult when investment in health is limited. This is what the WHO PEN disease interventions want to address. PEN has three components: risk factor assessment and screening, WHO ISH risk prediction charts, and interventions. Risk factor assessment and screening involves taking the patient's family history, if the patient is a smoker and or an alcoholic drinker, diets such as intake of fatty foods, dietary fiber, and finally, the patient's physical activity. Central adiposity and BMI measurements are also important. There are two suggested points for waist measurements. First is at the level of the umbilicus. However, this method may become inaccurate if the patient is very overweight because the umbilicus level may be quite low. Second is midway or between the last rib and the suprailiac crest, which is preferred because of more stable landmarks. Next is to assess the patient's blood pressure. After the patient has fully rested for at least 5 minutes, blood pressure is taken, and then a second measurement is taken after 2 minutes. The BP is then averaged and classified on the following. It is considered normal if the systolic BP is less than 120 mmHg and the diastolic BP is less than 80 mmHg. Prehypertension if systolic BP is between 120 to 139 mmHg and diastolic BP is between 80 to 89 mmHg. Stage 1 hypertension if systolic BP is between 140 to 159 mmHg and diastolic BP is between 90 to 99 mmHg. Finally, it is considered stage 2 hypertension if the systolic BP is equal to or more than 160 mmHg and the diastolic BP is equal to or more than 100 mmHg. The most accurate and reliable technique for indirect blood pressure measurement is the auscultatory method. It is important that BP apparatus are calibrated regularly for accurate measurement. The client is then directed for screening procedures if any of the following are present: age greater than 40 years, tobacco or cigarette smoking, central adiposity, raised blood pressure, diabetes, family history of hypertension, stroke or heart attack, family history of diabetes or kidney disease. If none, provide the client with information on healthy lifestyle such as healthy diet, physical activity, and avoidance of exposure to tobacco, and advise the client to return after 1 year for a follow-up risk assessment. Determining the presence or absence of diabetes involves asking the patient of a previous diagnosis or examining the presence of the common symptoms of diabetes. Polophagia, which refers to the excessive eating, polydipsia, which refers to excessive thirst, and polyuria, which refers to excessive passage of urine. Blood glucose test is then performed if at least 2 of the symptoms are present. If the client has raised blood glucose, perform urine test for ketones. Next is to determine raised blood lipids using a cholesterol meter. If the client's blood cholesterol is more than or equal to 200 mg per 100 ml, check the shaded box for at risk. Perform urine tests for protein on all clients to determine the presence or absence of urine protein using urine strips. Collect urine in a clean and dry container or test tube and test immediately. If traces or an amount of urine protein is found, check the shaded box for at risk. After the screening procedures, the client will be interviewed using the questionnaire to determine probable angina, heart attack, stroke, or transient ischemic attack. The client is referred to the next level facility if any of the following conditions are present. Blood pressure of equal or more than to 140 over 90 mmHg in people below 40 years old to exclude secondary hypertension. Known heart disease, stroke, TIA, DM, kidney disease for assessment as necessary. Angina, claudication, worsening heart failure, raised blood pressure of more than or equal to 140 over 90 mmHg in DM above 130 over 80 mmHg in spite of treatment with 2 or 3 agents. Any proteinuria. Newly diagnosed diabetes with urine ketones 2 plus or in lean persons of below 30 years old. Diabetes mellitus with fasting blood glucose of more than 14 mmol per L despite maximal metformin with or without sulfonylurea. Diabetes mellitus with severe infection and or foot ulcers. If none of the referral criteria is present, the physician shall determine the total risk of the patient using the WHO ISH risk prediction charts to guide him or her on the specific preventive actions and with what degree of intensity. After all the steps taken, we can now proceed to the interventions. All individuals with persistent raised blood pressure of more than or equal to 160 over 100 mmHg should be given antihypertensive treatment. All patients with established diabetes and cardiovascular disease, such as coronary heart disease, myocardial infarction, transient ischemic attacks, cerebrovascular disease, or peripheral vascular disease, if stable, should continue the treatment already prescribed and should be considered at risk of more than 30%. All individuals with total cholesterol at or above 8 mmol per liter, that is 320 mg per dl, should be given lifestyle advice and statins. If risk is less than 20%, counsel on diet, physical activity, and smoking cessation. If risk is less than 10%, follow up in 12 months. If risk is 10 to less than 20%, follow up every 3 months until targets are met, then 6 to 9 months thereafter. If risk is 20 to less than 30%, counsel on diet, physical activity, and smoking cessation. Persistent blood pressure of more than or equal to 140 over 90 mmHg and in DM more than or equal to 130 over 80 mmHg, consider a low dose of one of the drugs, hydrochlorothiazide, enalapril, atenolol, or amlodipine. Follow up every 3 to 6 months. Additional actions for diabetes mellitus. If despite a diabetic diet, fasting blood glucose is raised, start on metformin. Titrate metformin to target glucose value. Give advice on foot care. Follow up at least every 3 months. If resources allow, give a statin to those more than or equal 40 years old, even if cardiovascular risk is low. Refer for eye examination every 2 years. If risk is more than 30%, counsel on diet, physical activity, and smoking cessation. Persistent blood pressure of equal to 130 over 80 mmHg should be given one of the drugs, thiazide, ACE inhibitor, beta blocker, and calcium channel blocker. Give a statin. Follow up every 3 months. Other recommendations are as follows. At the community level, this is the algorithm for NCD risk assessment, which is generally the same with also a similar criteria for referral. Hi guys, I am Animated Noli, and I know that the previous segment was quite saddening and intimidating. But don't you worry, for I will be discussing the DOH Lifestyle-Related Diseases Program. Non-communicable diseases or NCDs include cardiovascular conditions, diabetes mellitus, lung or chronic respiratory diseases, and a range of cancers, which are the top causes of deaths globally and locally. These diseases are considered as lifestyle-related and is mostly the result of unhealthy habits. Behavioral and modifiable risk factors like smoking, alcohol abuse, consuming too much fat, salt and sugar, and physical inactivity have sparkled an epidemic of these NCDs, which pose a public threat and economic burden. The program's vision is to have a Philippines free from the avoidable burden of NCDs. While its mission is to ensure sustainable health-promoting environments and accessible, cost-effective, comprehensive, equitable, and quality healthcare services for the prevention and control of NCDs, and guided by the principle of health in all, health by all, health for all, whereas health in all refers to health in all policies, health by all involves the whole of government and the whole of society, and the health for all captures the KP or Kalusugan Pangkalahatan or the Universal Healthcare or UHC. The program has a ton of objectives to raise the priority accorded to the prevention and control of non-communicable diseases in national, regional, and local health and development plans, to strengthen leadership, governance, and multi-sectoral actions for the prevention and control of non-communicable diseases, to reduce modifiable risk factors for non-communicable diseases and underlying social determinants through creation of health-promoting environments, to strengthen health systems and increase access to quality medicines, products, and services, especially at the primary healthcare towards attainment of universal health coverage, to promote and support research and development for the prevention and control of non-communicable diseases, and lastly, to monitor the trends and determinants of non-communicable diseases and to evaluate the progress in their prevention and control. The program components include cardiovascular disease, diabetes mellitus, cancer, and chronic respiratory disease. These are the policies and laws that governs the program. The AO number 2011-0003 or the National Policy on Strengthening the Prevention and Control of Chronic Lifestyle-Related and Non-Communicable Diseases. The AO number 2012-0029 or the Implementing Guidelines on the Institutionalization of Philippine Package of Essential NCD Interventions or PhilPen on the Integrated Management of Hypertension and Diabetes for Primary Healthcare Facilities. This was discussed a while ago. The AO number 2013-0005 or the National Policy on the Unified Registry Systems of the Department of Health, Chronic Non-Communicable Diseases, Injury-Related Cases, Persons with Disabilities, and Violence Against Women and Children Registry Systems. The AO 2015-0052 National Policy on Palliative and Hospice Care in the Philippines. The AO 2016-0001 Revised Policy on Cancer Prevention and Control Program. The AO 2016-0014 Implementing Guidelines on the Organization of Health Clubs for Patients with Hypertension and Diabetes in Health Facilities. Here are the relevant statistics. From the National Nutrition Survey, Food and Nutrition Research Institute, in 20 years old and above, the prevalence of hypertension last 2015 was 23.9. The prevalence of high fasting glucose last 2013 was 5.6. The prevalence of high total cholesterol was 18.6. The prevalence of binge drinking in 2015 was 58.8 in males and 41.9 in females. The prevalence of insufficiently physically active adults in 2015 was 42.5. The prevalence of overweight and obese an adult in 2013 It was 27.6 in males, while it is 34.4 in females. According to the Global Adult Tobacco Survey in 2015, the prevalence of current tobacco use was 23.8. Now, you might be thinking that this program sounds good, but what was the impact of it in the country so far? Well, to answer that question, let me show you the program's accomplishments and status. The finalization of the Philippine Multi-Sectoral Strategic Plan for the Prevention and Control of NCDs 2017 to 2025. The Philippine Package of Essential NCD Intervention for the Integrated Management of Hypertension and Diabetes is being implemented nationwide. This is being implemented by developing the DOH Hypertension and Diabetes Health Clubs in primary healthcare facilities, which will ensure continuity of care and provision of NCD drugs. A registry of hypertensive and diabetics was also developed and is maintained by the department. Training on diabetes management using insulin for regional offices and LGUs. Provision of NCD drugs through the medicine access programs. Breast cancer, childhood cancer, colon and rectum cancer, insulin, NCD maintenance medicines for hypertension and diabetes. Training on cervical cancer screening using visual inspection using acetic acid or VIA among healthcare workers started in 2013 and it's still ongoing. Monitoring of trained institutions started in 2014. NCD indicators are integrated in existing DOH current performance reporting systems like Field Health Service Information System, Local Government Unit Scorecard. DOH support for proposed legislative bills focusing on addressing the harmful effects of alcohol consumption and integrating palliative and hospice care into the healthcare system. That's it for today's report. Thank you.